Live from Washington, D.C., this is Balance of Power with Joe Mathieu and Kailey Leinz.
The president meets with leaders at the G7 as the world asks, what's in the deal? Welcome to the Tuesday edition. As President Trump rounds his day in France with a signing ceremony on that deal with Iran, set for the end of this week. I'm Joe Mathieu alongside Kailey Leinz in Washington. And Kailey, no matter what is in this 14-point memo of understanding, it will not be addressing Iran's nuclear program.
No, that's what the next 60 days are for. That is, of course, how long the ceasefire will be prolonged. And the ultimate objective, the Trump administration says, is to guarantee that Iran will never pursue a nuclear weapon. But the question around the enriched uranium still in Iranian territory, President Trump today suggested that perhaps it's not really a big deal to go and get it, to paraphrase his words. Suggesting again that it's a psychological kind of a thing. He had some tough talk for Israel, disappointed in the way that Benjamin Netanyahu has been handling Lebanon, and also questions about Congress. The president now does seem in favor of sending whatever is in this agreement to Congress to sign off and codify this into law. Yeah, of course, that has been what many Republicans in Congress have been calling for, including perhaps one of the biggest Iran war hawks of them all, Senator Lindsey Graham, wants to see this deal when there is one. To your point on Israel, the president also suggested on the sidelines of the G7 summit today in a bilateral meeting with the UAE that Israel wouldn't exist without him. That's right. And I wonder the reaction to that statement from the former Israeli ambassador to the United States, Michael Oren, who will be with us in just a few minutes. That's right. And we're going to bring you to France to get the latest from Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall, who's traveling with the president. There's, I guess, some sort of cultural presentation going on right now, and then the big G7 dinner to be a fly on the wall for some of these conversations. I will say that the oil markets have been responding positively. Well, at least if you're a bear. We've got 7 handle on both WTI and Brent today. Kailey, but a little bit of confusion, you might say, in the stock market as the Fed meeting gets underway this week in Washington. Yep, Kevin Warsh's first decision and press conference is due tomorrow. So let's get a check on how markets are bracing for that and dealing with all of these other headlines as we turn to Charlie Pellet up in New York. Hey, Charlie.
Hi, thank you very much, Kailey Leinz. Indeed, from the G7 to the Mag 7, we got you covered here at Bloomberg. Dow higher, trading at a record. S&P, NASDAQ, they are both slumping. We'll throw in the NASDAQ 100 index as well. Full of big tech names. It, too, is down right now. The NASDAQ 100 index down 1.3%. NASDAQ Composite down 0.5%. S&P lower little change, down 0.2%. But the Dow Industrials holding close to session highs, up 493 now, up by 1% at 52,163. That is a record, also for the first time ever, trading above 52,000. Our Mag 7 index down 0.4%. All of this with the SOX, the Philadelphia Stock Exchange's semiconductor index, down now by 3.4%, and the VIX just a hair below 16. The 10-year 4.41%, with the 2-year 4.03%, and the 30-year 4.92%. Spot gold is up 0.6%, 43.38 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude, big story there, slumping another 6%, 75.91 a barrel on WTI. Brent crude, 78.85. Barrel of Brent down now by 5.2%. Again, Dow at a record on the eve of the first Fed rate decision under Kevin Warsh. Cannot ignore another move higher today for shares of SpaceX. Now, day 3 of trading up another 12.7%. SpaceX, by the way, has surpassed Amazon in market cap. Amazon up by under 0.1%. But the big news, SpaceX keeps on going, up another 12.3%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcast. I'm Charlie Pellet. Joe and Kailey, that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie Pellet, thank you very much. Just incredible to consider SpaceX has only been a public company for 3 days, and it already could be cracking the top 5 in terms of the largest publicly traded companies that exist on planet Earth. And Elon Musk, of course, still far and away the wealthiest person on paper on planet Earth. That trillionaire status keeps adding a bunch of numbers to that.
A lot of zeros.
Ticking. Yeah, a lot of zeros, and he just keeps climbing as that stock does. But of course, as we consider the wider picture Wall Street is contending with, as Charlie mentioned, we are seeing yields lower and oil lower today on the back of optimism around this memorandum of understanding between the U.S. and Iran that the Vice President J.D. Vance in an interview yesterday described as a general document, only about a page and a half. So our real question is, what exactly will this MOU accomplish? What is in it? This is what the president had to say about that at the G7 earlier today.
Here's what it says. Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. That's what it says. It won't have one. To buy, to develop, they will not have a nuclear weapon. And I would say that's about 99.9% of what I wanted, because we couldn't let that happen. You couldn't let that happen. And they won't have a nuclear weapon. Now, in addition to that, the Strait is going to be open toll-free.
Toll-free semantics we do explore here with Iran suggesting, according to some reporting, that maybe not tolls, but fees, as they're calling them, will be in place when the Strait reopens. Either way, the market is taking this in stride, and we are all waiting for the president, for the administration, to start filling in the cracks on what is in this 14-point agreement. That's why we turn to Bloomberg Washington correspondent Tyler Kendall, who is traveling with the president. The hills are alive with the G7 in Evian, France. If you're with us on Bloomberg TV or on YouTube, we're joined by a Tyler Kendall, who is in a gorgeous setting, hopefully one that might produce some results here. Tyler, I know the president is going to be resolving into a meeting with G7 leaders this evening. Having had some bilateral meetings today, are we learning more about what's in the agreement?
Well, Joe, at this point, President Trump says that he's going to wait for a more formal setting, in his words, to release that finalized text of what is in this memorandum of understanding. But until we get those final details, it is raising some questions among our allies here at the G7 summit, perhaps most notably about what is prioritized in this deal when it opening the Strait of Hormuz. Of course, we know that both sides say that we are going to see freedom of navigation in the strait, at least for the 60-day extension of the ceasefire. But our allies are raising some concerns about what assurances there are to ensure safe transit. And I had the chance to catch up with the spokesperson for France's foreign ministry, Pascal Canfrou, and asked him if France has the necessary clarity that it needs in order to commit military assets to help secure the waterway once this deal is signed, and he told me not yet.
This agreement that happened just before the G7 was a good news. It was supported by the different members of the G7. Second, we all want to make it a reality and a lasting reality in the days to come. So it was part of the discussions that are happening actually this morning. And third, yes, as President Macron said, we stand ready to deploy this multinational mission that we've been working on with our UK partners for now a couple of weeks. There was a summit of the Elysee on April 17th that gathered 50 states that are ready to, in a way or another, take part in this freedom of navigation operation. Concretely, it will mean first to have the ability to swipe mines, and second, to have the ability of having some military escorts of civilian ships. Now, the discussions are to see how it can be possible to deploy it if the situations agree on the ground. So that are parts of the discussion, but we stand ready to do it.
What are the biggest roadblocks in those discussions?
But first, we have to see how the agreement will unfold. The agreement was electronically signed a few hours before. Now we have to wait for the Friday signature ceremony, which will happen in a few kilometers from here in Switzerland. And so the discussions are to see how the belligerents will take that into account for the future, and what do they need to reestablish this freedom of navigation, because you know that it's extremely important for us first to have that as soon as possible for the sake of our global economies, but also second, not to have any toll in the future, because this is unacceptable in terms of rise of shipments, but also in terms of precedents that we want to avoid for any future straits in the world.
Well, since you brought up tolling, we did hear from Iranian state media seeming to indicate that after that 60-day extension of the ceasefire, we could see fees imposed later. They're not calling them tolls, but they're saying they would be related to navigational services, insurance services. Is this something that France would be willing to accept, fees, even if it meant reopening the strait, at least in the near term?
We're against it, so we have to discuss on that. We're against it for two reasons. These straits, they are international waters, so we have to respect international law. Second, it will increase the cost of international shipment. And third, we have to avoid any precedents for that, because you have many other straits in the world, and in this case, it could create problems in other parts of the world.
What is France's assessment on the timeline that it could take to get the Strait reopened?
The discussions are happening now. So it's for us, it has to be as soon as possible to have this decision taking place, and then you'll have concretely how we can help it on the ground, which means indeed minesweeping and also preparing these escorts. But there has been a lot of work in the last weeks, a lot of work in terms of military planning to say, okay, which are the different countries that are ready to do it, how they can contribute, which kind of frigates and so on. And for instance, France can deploy quite quickly some frigates, some minesweepers as well, but with other countries such as Italy, for instance, also, but can also deploy some planes. We have our aircraft carrier, which is in the nearby, in the vicinity, and so as soon as possible, we can, when the decision will be taken, we can be on the ground on that.
That was a conversation earlier today here on the sidelines of the G7 summit with the spokesperson for France's foreign ministry. And Joe and Kailey, we heard from another ally today as well, the German Chancellor Merz, telling reporters within the last hour that he told President Trump directly that Germany is ready to commit military assets to a naval mission. But he also echoed the same sentiment that the country needs to see some firmer details around this memorandum of understanding before those assets are deployed.
All right, Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall live in Evian, France for the G7 summit. Thank you so much. Tyler, of course, running us through the views of two allies of the United States around this potential memorandum of understanding or the existing memorandum of understanding that we just only know potentially what is in it. But we have to consider another ally as well, Israel, where President Trump has had some pointed words for Israel and the conduct of the Netanyahu government specifically. And as we mentioned earlier, even going so far as to say today that Israel wouldn't exist without him, that there would be no Israel, in his words, without me. So for reaction to all of this, we turn now to the former Israeli ambassador to the United States, Ambassador Michael Oren. Ambassador, welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio. Could we just begin, and we'll get to the president's specific comments regarding Israel in a moment, with the Israeli view of this memorandum of understanding as we understand it? I know that there are a lot of details that we aren't firm on to this point. So what does this actually need to look like for Israel to be comfortable with it?
Well, it's good to be back with you, too, as well. Well, there were 5 goals set out by the United States and Israel jointly at the beginning of this war. They were to prevent Iran from getting the nuclear weapon, ending its nuclear program, removing the stockpile of highly enriched uranium. That's up about close to 2,000 pounds of highly enriched uranium that could be made into about a dozen bombs, probably more. Stopping Iran's intercontinental ballistic missile system that has been pummeling Iran's neighbors and the state of Israel. These are huge missiles. And stopping Iran's support for terrorist groups like Hezbollah, like Hamas, like the Houthis. And generally changing the Iranian regime in such a way that it no longer threatens its neighbors and no longer threatens its own citizens. Those were the goals of the war. Another one was added during the course of the war, and that was reopening the Strait of Hormuz. And the question is to what degree, if any, this memorandum of understanding addresses any of these issues, which are absolutely vital for the state of Israel. The president has criticized Israel's actions to defend itself against Hezbollah. What we have to recall is the entire northern part of this country where I'm sitting, the Galilee, which is known to a great number of Americans from their religious services, is completely uninhabited today because they are being shelled daily by Hezbollah rockets and drones, and Israel has to take whatever measures are necessary to defend those citizens, to send that part of the country, even at the cost of standing up to the President of the United States.
So let's talk about what Americans are hearing from their president, ambassador, and I'm sure that you heard yourself. He said, I've had a great relationship with Bibi, but now Bibi has to be more responsible with respect to Lebanon. More specifically, he said you don't have to knock down an apartment house every time you're looking for somebody because there are a lot of people in those apartment houses and they're not all Hezbollah. I'm not happy with the way Israel has handled themselves with Lebanon and with Hezbollah. Is there some truth to what he's saying, Ambassador, or does this display a fundamental misunderstanding of the threats facing Israel?
It's a long-standing, I would say, difference we've had with the United States. We're dealing with enemies that on purpose hide among the civilian population. They use them as shields. And they're going to keep on shooting at us. And if civilians are hurt or tragically killed, and that is a tragedy, certainly, It is not the responsibility of the state of Israel. I think the president would be well advised to address his comments to Hezbollah and tell Hezbollah to stop shooting at the northern part of this country and rendering it uninhabitable, and stop hiding behind its civilian populations. And there'll be no further apartment buildings that'll be collapsed.
Well, as you talk about a misunderstanding here between the United States and Israel, or at least in the way in which the U.S. is understanding this particular circumstance in Lebanon, does it actually not go deeper than that, Ambassador? Do you see the ambitions and incentives here for the U.S. and Israel at this point actually diverging when it comes to Iran? Is Israel going to have to go its own way at some point?
Well, I think it's natural that the interests at some point would diverge. The United States is a very big country. It's situated far from the Middle East. It's not threatened immediately with rocket and missile fire or terrorism from Iran, not immediately. And Israel's a small country. We're in Iran's backyard, and we are threatened not just strategically, we're threatened existentially. If we don't defend the North, we basically lost this country. So a very different set of interests at the end of the day. And yes, those interests might diverge. But Israel will simply say, and I think with due respect to the president, that this agreement is between the United States and Iran, not with Israel. We were not consulted about the agreement. We're not to the agreement, and we're certainly not signed on this agreement. It does not obligate us in any way. We will continue to take whatever measures are necessary to defend our land and our people, whether it be in Lebanon or elsewhere, in addressing in any continued threat from the Iranian nuclear and ballistic program.
Mm-hmm. What's the feeling when you talk to people on the ground in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem today, Ambassador? Is it one of optimism or one of nervousness about what this deal might lead to?
Very somber mood indeed. There was a shimmering moment some months ago that we thought maybe we were looking at a completely different future for this country and for the entire region. A region that would be free of the Iranian threat, in which Israel and Lebanon could make peace, Israel and Syria could make peace, Israel and Saudi Arabia, maybe even Israel and a post-Ayatollah Iran could make peace, and that there would be a restored American Pax Americana that would extend from the Mediterranean to the banks of the Ganges. That was our hope, and now that hope has very largely dissipated. We do not know what's in this memorandum of understanding, but from what we can tell so far, there seems to be there's no relation to to the ballistic missiles, to the support for terror, to Iran's commitment to destroy this country and kill the 10 million people in it. It's a genocidal policy. And so, yes, we have, together with the United States, greatly degraded Iran's military capabilities. We've degraded its proxies' abilities. We pushed them back from our borders. But we may find ourselves in not too far into the future facing very similar threats, and maybe even more enhanced threats than we have confronted in the past.
So, Ambassador, do you see a risk, as the U.S. is obviously pursuing this diplomatic off-ramp and not continuing offensive operations against Iran, that the U.S. could get drawn back in defensively, having to defend its ally, Israel? Do you really think that could be the future?
It could be, and it has been in the past, too. During the Biden administration, Iran fired twice at Israel hundreds of missiles and drones. And the Biden administration, together, even with our Arab allies, joined in defending and helping to defend Israel's skies. And this certainly happened last summer during the 12-day war. It happened now during this most recent war. That will happen again because the United States is committed to our defense. But there may, as you said, may be differences of policy about how Israel defends itself. We have very, very little wiggle room. That's all I can say. No Israeli government, doesn't matter if it's the Netanyahu government or any other government, can maintain its legitimacy as long as it does not fulfill its primary duty, which is defending this country and defending its citizens. Yes, even at the risk of some friction with our ultimate ally, but that is our duty. That is our job.
So let's say best case scenario for this week, a deal is signed and the clock starts on a 60-day negotiating period, Ambassador. What happens if there is no deal on nuclear by the end of that 60 days?
Well, I don't know. I'm not a prophet, but I would wager there'd be another 60-day extension. One of the benefits I can see so far, from what we know, is that in contrast to the 2015 JCPOA of the Obama administration, which gave Iran money up front, in the hope that Iran would become, and I'm quoting President Obama here, would become a responsible regional power, which never happened. It appears that the Trump administration is withholding payments to Iran until it conforms to the terms of the treaty. I think that would be a positive development here. But again, it may fall very far short of Israel's basic security needs.
Ambassador, as we mentioned at the beginning, we obviously have heard some sharp words from President Trump regarding Israel in the last 24 hours. I'd like you to just listen to what he said earlier at the G7 summit, and we'll get your response.
Without the United States, there would be no Israel. Without me, there would be no Israel, because no other president was willing to do what I did. I've had a great relationship with Bibi, but now Bibi has to be more responsible with respect to Lebanon.
Without the United States, there would be no Israel. Without me, there would be no Israel. Ambassador, what would Israel realistically to be able to do in terms of its own defense or offensively against Hezbollah if it did not have the backing and weapons from the United States?
Well, again, I'm going to answer you not just as a former ambassador, but as an historian. Israel did not have a strategic alliance with the United States before 1967. We fought the Six-Day War with French arms, not with American arms. And Israel has existed. When I say we have survived, sometimes it's been a close call, but we have survived. Without American armaments, Israel would have to seek armaments elsewhere. But I assure you, the president's going to say that Netanyahu has been irresponsible, but the criticism of Netanyahu in this country is that he has not been sufficiently responsible and that he has not responded with sufficient force against Hezbollah. And that is certainly the criticism of those residents of the north, both of those who are remaining under fire and those who have been displaced. And we're talking about tens of thousands of people who have been displaced. They are very, very critical of the prime minister, to the point that that criticism is now deeply impairing his chances of being reelected in the elections coming up in the fall.
We always appreciate spending some time with you, Ambassador. Thanks for being with us once again on Bloomberg. That's Michael Oren, of course, the former Israeli ambassador to the U.S. We're going to have a lot more on the president's travels to France, his meetings at the G7, and, of course, the status of this peace deal as we work our way toward what we are told will be a signing ceremony in Geneva on Friday. And we're going to play this panel, to the panel, I should say, coming up next. Rick Davis and Jeanne Zaino are with us. We just talked about a lot with the ambassador that we'll unpack with them coming up. First, we want to take a look at the markets, latest on Wall Street from Charlie Pellet, who's standing by at World Headquarters in New York. Where should we start, Charlie?
Right now, let's start with the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Joe Mathieu, we're looking at a record there right now. The Dow at 52,140. That is a gain of 468 points. Yes, off our session highs, but still advancing by 0.9%. Big question, are we going to close above or just below 52,000 today? The Dow, by the way, being led higher by JP Morgan Chase, 3M, and Caterpillar. S&P 500 index close to the worst level now, down 22, drop there of 0.3%. NASDAQ is down 168, down 0.6%. But tech is where the real damage is being done today. The NASDAQ 100 index, it is retreating now by 1.4%. All of this with a VIX below 16 and a 10-year at 4.42%. Gold up $15 the ounce, 43.26 now, higher by 0.3%. West Texas Intermediate crude 75.86 a barrel. WTI down 6.1%. Barrel of Brent 78.70, down by 5.4%. Day 3 of SpaceX shares are jumping again, overtaking Amazon as the 5th largest publicly traded company in the world. Only days after its blockbuster debut on Friday, shares were up yesterday. They're up again today. Right now, SpaceX is advancing by 11.2%. Amazon, by the way, down now by 0.1%. Meanwhile, SpaceX formally agreeing to take over Cursor in a deal that values the AI coding startup at $60 billion. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcast. Joe and Kailey, that's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie Pellet, thank you very much. Of course, there's some optimism, at least in oil markets, as you see with prices moving lower, that the Strait of Hormuz will reopen and energy will be flowing once again. Is that optimism, though, shared around the prospects of Iran never having a nuclear weapon? as President Trump maintains that that is what the memorandum of understanding that the U.S. and Iran will formally sign in ceremony in Switzerland on Friday. Israel seems a little bit more uncertain about that, as we just heard from the former Israeli ambassador to the United States, Michael Oren, talking, Joe, about an existential threat that many, he says, in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem today still feel is present, not just via Iran, but its many proxies as well.
Yeah, you do wonder if the signing of this deal will at last really expose the sunlight between our two governments when it comes to Iran and Lebanon. By that we mean Hezbollah. This is something that is a point of friction that's not going to be going away. It's really tough talk from the president today about Netanyahu and the way that he's comported this whole operation in Lebanon. We want to hear from our panel on some of the comments that we just heard from Michael Oren. Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis and Jeanne Zaino join us right now. Jeanne is our Democratic analyst, democracy visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center. Rick is a Republican strategist and partner at Stonecourt Capital. Rick, when you listen to the ambassador and you consider the somber feelings that he described among people in Israel, they're not celebrating the news, at least that which has come out so far today. It does make you wonder if at some point Israel will decide to go it alone against Iran. What's your thought after that conversation?
You know, I'm not sure I'd even describe it as go it your own. I mean, Israel has been fighting for its survival almost since the day they were, created as a state. And Michael Oren mentioned a couple of the conflicts that have been fought over time, any one of which could have been existential to the future of the state of Israel. And the mentality of the people I know in Israel is we're just going to keep fighting, right? They don't anticipate a day where they don't have an enemy, either coming from the south, Egypt from historical, experience, not so much anymore, but like from the north in Syria and Lebanon, Hezbollah. They've been sandwiched between enemies since the day they were consecrated. And so the reality is, I just think there's a mentality that said, of course we're going to keep fighting. I mean, why wouldn't we keep fighting? It's what we do here in Israel. We're really good at it. It's why we've preserved the state we have and the freedoms we have. And look, as the only functioning democracy in that region, as one of our greatest allies around the world, and as a group of people who have led the cultural and economic vitality of the state of Israel that has been shared by the United States, what in the world are we taking sides over Israel with Iran, who's not fulfilled any of those aspirations? So I don't know. This administration picks winners and losers all the time. They don't really stay married long, and we'll see what happens next. But it's a difficult time because I think Israel appreciates everything the United States has done for it, but isn't banking on us being their savior forever. They believe in themselves.
Well, and as we consider that prospect of the U.S. forever being Israel's savior, to use Rick's words, Jeanne, no matter how disappointed the Trump administration may be or how disappointed the Biden administration was with Israel's conduct in Gaza, do you really see any time in the near future that the United States would be willing to turn its back on Israel?
I think if we look at the polling, and this has been one of the starkest changes I think we've seen in polling in a long time, has been the decline in support amongst the American public, and not just on the left, but on the right as well, for Israel. And so I think that is a generational change. I think it's something that we could see going forward. But, if I'm Israel and I'm looking at what's happening today, why wouldn't I be dead set against this? They went into the war and they were very clear why. To ensure that Iran was no longer a nuclear threat, didn't have access to nuclear weapons, and for regime change. And to ensure this existential threat, as the ambassador called it, which is absolutely the right word, is no longer able to threaten them. None of that has happened. And to make things worse, we are all more vulnerable today to a more radical Iran, We are more vulnerable to Iran that now knows it can hold the U.S. and the world economy hostage, and to proxies that are not going to be addressed. So if I'm Israel, I would absolutely be dead set against this MOU. Benjamin Netanyahu politically at home doesn't have the option of standing up straight against Donald Trump at this point. But there is nothing that we know about this yet unseen MOU which suggests that Israel would be anything but dead set against it. And that is because Donald Trump wants to, for the purpose of his own political future and the midterms coming up, get out of this war of choice that he entered and got us into. And he'll do anything to do that, even sell out his closest allies.
Well, you tend not to think that much of this is going to factor into decisions being made in states holding runoff elections today. It is a primary day, and I guess that's unfortunate because some of these folks we're talking about here could be working in the House or the Senate, which may need to vote on something like this. The president did say today that he is open to this agreement going to Congress, which, of course, has oversight over treaties, in this case, that the president may be signing on Friday, or J.D. Vance in his stead. I do want to ask you both about some of the elections that we're looking at, specifically in Georgia. We went, of course, to Atlanta just a couple of weeks ago to cover the primary there that resolved into runoffs for Senate and for governor. And we're going to find out tonight which Republican will be running against Jon Ossoff, the Democratic senator from Georgia. And we've got a presidential endorsement now all of a sudden. Donald Trump swinging in at the last minute to endorse Representative Mike Collins, which creates a bit of drama here because Republican Governor Brian Kemp is backing Derek Dooley, the former football coach, in that contest. Interesting moment in our bureau today when Bloomberg's David Gura sat down with Raphael Warnock, the other Democratic senator from Georgia, to talk about politics on the ground in this important state. Here's what the senator said.
It's a purple state, so you got to convince all kinds of people to vote for you. I did it 5 times in Georgia in less than 3 years. It's doable. Of course, I'm rooting for my brother, Jon Ossoff, and I think he will do well against whomever they put up. I think Keisha Lance Bottoms will do well in this election.
What's your take on Georgia and this race specifically, Rick Davis? Remember, Congressman Buddy Carter was in that primary, and he got 20%. I don't know where those voters break, but who would you rather have faced Jon Ossoff as our Republican?
Yeah, this is what's so hard. I mean, I think we talked about this earlier in the program. Midterms are hard because they're hard to predict because there's such little turnout, and runoff of a midterm is even less turnout. Only 500,000 people voted already in advance of today's primary, which is incredibly low. And so, look, you got to give advantage to Trump. He stuck his neck out, which means he's got polling that said that Collins is likely to win. He doesn't like to get involved in races that aren't close to being a sure thing, so he probably knows more than I do about it. But Dooley's a minted name in Georgia, and not only has he been endorsed by the governor, but the governor has actively campaigned for him all around the state. And, he's still an incredibly popular governor, much more popular than Donald Trump. So that's a real race to watch. I do think that it's a big issue for Republicans in Georgia as to what the future Georgia's party is going to look like.
Well, and of course, Governor Brian Kemp once faced a Trump-backed challenger in a primary, and he prevailed in Georgia, to Rick's point, which raises the question once again, Jeanne, of even if the president has his way in the primary and his backed candidate and Mike Collins ultimately wins, or Burt Jones in the gubernatorial race, for that matter, how does that play in the general when voters of all stripes, as the senator was just talking about, in a purple state will be casting ballots? Does the more MAGA, more loyal to the president candidate necessarily have the odds with them?
I don't think so. There was a time not that long ago, Kailey, we would all talk about Jon Ossoff as one of the most vulnerable members of the Senate up for re-election this year. All of a sudden, his prospects have changed. He has moved up the list of 28 contenders. He's got real buzz. And why? Because, as the senator was just talking about, he's able to speak to voters of all stripes, from progressives to moderates and even conservatives, Why? I think it's because Ossoff has focused like a laser beam on the one issue voters care about, which, sorry, President Trump, is not the 2020 election, as he keeps talking about, but the economy. And that is what this election is going to be about. And that's why I think Raphael Warnock can, say that it almost doesn't matter who wins for Democrats. They'd rather run against, I think, Collins than Dooley. But it almost doesn't matter, because this race is going to be about one thing and one thing alone, and that is the economy. And Republicans are going to have trouble running on that, which is why President Trump is so hell-bent on getting this MOU signed and put behind him. So I think this election in Georgia was one we thought was going to be really up for grabs for Jon Ossoff, and he is looking stronger and stronger than we ever thought before from the Democratic perspective.
All right, Jeanne, Sheehan, Zaino, and Rick Davis, Bloomberg Politics contributors, the both of them, and we'll see what results bring this evening or tomorrow morning in Georgia. We also should note, Joe, that it's primary day in D.C. as well,
yes,
the
indeed.
mayoral race, one to watch, knowing that D.C. is one of the bluest cities in the country. So whoever
100%.
wins this primary basically is going to become the next mayor.
As opposed to the reflecting pool. It was blue when you went down there, and it's very green now with
that algae blossoms.
You can see they're pouring nano bubbles into the reflecting pool now to take care of the algae problem. That should fix it.
You would need a lot of bubbles, a lot of hydrogen peroxide.
That's what they're
Remember
dumping
this,
in there.
This is as long as skyscrapers, as the president continually points out. We'll have more ahead here on Bloomberg.
It's 1:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. We've got the Dow holding on to a record. S&P, NASDAQ, they are both declining. NASDAQ 100 as well. It is down now by 1.5%. All the big tech names, they are tumbling. We've got NASDAQ down by 0.7%. S&P lower by 28 for the S&P. That is a drop there of 0.4%. The Dow, meanwhile, up 439, trading above 52,000 for the first time. 52,111 right now, up by 0.9%. The VIX below 16. The SOX is down by 4%, the 10-year, 4.42% for the 2-year, 4.03%. Crude, major story today. West Texas Intermediate crude now down by 6.1%, 75.81 a barrel. Brent 78.70 down by 5.5%. Verizon Communications is launching a simplified wireless service plan, while also introducing a new loyalty rewards program. Recapping, S&P 500 index down 0.4%. I'm Charlie Pellet. Joe and Kailey, that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie Pellet, thank you, sir. He'll be back with more on the markets coming up at the top of the hour as the S&P 500 extends its decline to session lows here. We're all old enough to remember S&P 7600 back at the beginning of this month. So don't despair. Some of these declines seem severe, but bring us back only a couple of weeks in some cases. I will say, Kailey, and Charlie's been hitting this, the one thing that is nice to see lower is oil, not to mention interest rates, but crude oil futures in New York and overseas, Brent, all showing a 7 handle now. WTI just under $76 a barrel. And Brent is at about 78, which is a far cry from the peak around $120 that we saw a couple of months ago. So we'll call that a good thing, and presumably gas prices will follow, right?
Yeah, it's just a question of how quickly, but this is the lowest we have seen for oil prices, at least the front month, since going back to when this war started, very early days of March. The question we have for Mike McClellan, who's our senior commodity strategist at Bloomberg Intelligence, is how much further can they go from here? How much of the good news surrounding the Strait of Hormuz and the optimism around it reopening completely by Friday, the president says, is already baked in to this price. So, Mike, how much further could we see this deterioration in oil prices, and how quickly?
Well, that's the key thing, Kailey. We're subject to the nuances of war and to Mr. Trump. But the bottom line, the 10 on a scale 1 to 10 for crude oils, what does Mr. Trump need, the leader of the world's largest energy producer, a net exporter by midterms? He needs lower energy prices. I still fully expect him to get that, and natural gas has been a great guide. Remember, it did the same thing in 2023. It led the way down. It's down in the year, and I think by the end of the year, crude oil is going to be down in the year, particularly if you see what's happening today continues, a little back up in the stock market. Remember, it is a midterm election year, and stocks usually go down in those kind of years, and that's a key pressure factor for crude oil. But the bottom line for crude oil is I'm much more comfortable now around $75 a barrel. When it got above 100, it breaks stuff and it brings on more supply from the U.S. Now they're around 75. The key theme to remember, though, is it almost always goes down to a low price cure, and I think that's going to be closer to 50 by the end of the year.
Wow, that would be something. Remembering we were at $67 a barrel. I actually had to check this morning, Mike, before the war broke out on February 28th. I want to ask you about gas. We're at $4.04 today. Again, before the war, that would have seemed shocking, but we have seen daily declines, a couple pennies a day here, to where we're just now getting back down to about $4. I'll tell you what, I filled up for, I think it was $3.79 a gallon about a week ago in the state of Virginia. So you certainly can get below $4 pretty easily. But you've heard this reference a lot, the old elevator up and stairs down. Is that going to be the case for gas?
Yes, because we're into the driving season. The average gasoline price now is $4.04. If you look at futures, Joe, it should be down closer to $3.80. Actually, futures lead the way a little bit. But as we get through the driving season, I fully expect to head closer to 3 and below 3, potentially towards 2, because that's what it usually does. The key theme is what's going to be different to make it higher this time. And I think if the straits cleared up after we've had that big pump in prices, it usually brings on that more supply and makes prices go lower.
Well, as we consider where all that supply is going to need to go, Mike, it's one thing for supply to meet just the kind of daily demand. But when you see a headline like we saw yesterday that the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve is at the lowest level in nearly half a century, how should we consider the demand that may be inspired by countries such as the U.S., but others as well, looking at China, for example, who want to refill their stockpiles? Is that not a force that could keep prices more elevated?
It's a very bearish factor, Kailey. Let's remember what the SPR was initially set up in the U.S. by President Ford in 1974 to cover 90 days of net imports. With Canada, the U.S. has a surplus running near 8 million barrels a day of crude oil and liquid fuels right now. We don't need an SPR anymore, except for nuances like this war and maybe hurricanes. Now, China needs an SPR because they're a net importer, but there's some estimates that they got their SPR up to 1.8 billion barrels, which would be 4 to 5 times the U.S. Now, they need it, but they've been selling out some of that because Chinese are the best commodity traders on the planet. They buy low. They filled up that SPR last year when prices are low, and they sell high, like this year when Brent got above 100. That's just what they've been doing for centuries.
Always a fascinating conversation with Mike McClellan, with us live from Miami at Bloomberg Intelligence. Mike, thank you so much. That would be quite a yearly chart. Kailey, if we get to the end of this year and we were up 100% and end up negative on the year, he's looking at $50 a barrel. Can you imagine after being well over 100?
Yeah, it would be incredible and something that Republicans probably would be pretty happy about as they look toward their odds of maintaining majorities in November.
A true round trip. We'll find out together if this happens, with big questions about the contents of this deal. We're seeing the markets react today. We could feel differently tomorrow, or maybe by Friday, when there is apparently a signing ceremony set to take place, because we don't know a lot of details. A 14-point memorandum of understanding, we understand, that would reopen the strait, but doesn't do a lot else in terms of informing us at the moment, particularly when it comes to nuclear. That would be part of another 60-day negotiating period to follow. President was asked if he'd send it to Congress. Should this be codified by lawmakers, not just an executive action? This is from earlier today at the G7 in France. Listen to the president.
I never thought about sending it, never even thought about it, but I will. I will send it to Congress. I like the idea. I mean, who wouldn't approve it? Let's let them have a nuclear weapon. The Democrats will say, oh, they should have a nuclear weapon. They'll go crazy. I like the idea. Send it to Congress, please, all right?
So what will happen if he does? Of course, again, we don't know a lot about the contents of this deal, but lawmakers are already preparing to weigh in on this, which is why we wanted to speak with Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan, the Democrat from Virginia's 4th District, joins us now. A member of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, certainly her eye being on gas prices and oil prices, with the hopes of this conflict resolving. Congresswoman, it's great to see you. Welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio. If what you know of this agreement arrived in Congress for an up or down vote, would you agree with it?
Well, I don't know what it is yet. And right now, the officials from the United States and the officials from Iran say two different things. For example, what is the deal with this $300 billion payment to Iran compared to the $1.7 billion from the Obama nuclear deal that the president ripped to shreds before starting this war in this second term. So I'm not sure what we're voting on yet, but I'm definitely looking very closely to see what we will get out of this war of choice that the president started, because right now I don't see that we're going to be any better off than we were before the war started. But now Iran has proven they can disrupt trade, they can disrupt oil prices, and disrupt world economies by closing the Strait of Hormuz, which was open before this war began.
Well, Congresswoman, as we consider, especially with your perch on the Energy Committee, what besides the unfreezing of assets, like you're referring to, the U.S. may have to offer Iran to extract concessions around things like its nuclear program? Are you comfortable with the notion of relief around sanctions on Iranian oil? Is that actually something that you could get behind the U.S. bartering with?
You know, I would have to look very closely at the entire deal. We had a deal that was acceptable before Trump in the first administration ripped it to shreds, that had the Strait of Hormuz open, that had UN officials coming in for inspections to make sure that Iran was meeting the terms of the deal. And now I don't know what's going to be in this deal. Is it going to include UN inspectors? You know, we still have 60 days to negotiate the nuclear aspects of this deal. Everybody agrees that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. They were nowhere near getting one before the president attacked them when his national security intelligence folks said there was no threat to the United States. There was no threat to our service members. There was no evidence that they were anywhere close to a nuclear program. And so I need to see the totality of whatever deal comes out in this 60-day negotiation. And does it put the Middle East on the path to peace? Does it ensure that Iran does not have a nuclear deal? Does it keep the Strait of Hormuz open? And what, at the end of the day, is it going to cost the American people?
It's not the only thing that's going to be coming before Congress soon, presuming that it does. The president, interestingly, there said he hadn't even considered that before he was asked about it. But it appears that the Senate is going to be voting on Jay Clayton's bid to be the next director of national intelligence by the end of this week. And there is a hope among Republican leaders that that will unlock a deal to extend FISA 702, because in that world, Bill Pulte would not be the director of national intelligence, which has brought this entire debate to a screeching halt. Would you be on board with a yes vote if Jay Clayton becomes the next DNI?
I would also like to see some reforms that will close the loopholes that have allowed the federal government to spy on American citizens, which Section 702 was never intended to do. That has been part of the negotiations, and I think we can reach an agreement that would balance our citizens' privacy rights under the Fourth Amendment with us meeting our national security needs. I would like to see that be part of any bill for FISA 702 extension before I sign it. But I will say that Pulte, being the one who implemented it, giving him the keys to spy on anybody, whether it's foreign nationals or American citizens, was a non-starter. Clayton is much less objectionable based on what I'm hearing from the Democrats on the Intelligence Committee. But I also need to see some reforms to close those loopholes that allow the federal government to spy on American citizens in violation of the Fourth Amendment.
But Congresswoman, are you not concerned about what could fall through our intelligence cracks so long as this program remains dark while these reforms are worked on? The FBI Director Kash Patel publicly said today that the FBI thwarted a planned drone and sniper attack on the UFC 250 event at the White House this past weekend. Are we not at greater threat of threats such as that if the intelligence community doesn't have access to what is gathered through the Section 702 programs?
So short term, nothing ends immediately. And I think the fact that they were able to thwart a threat is proof that right now they're still able to get the information that they need to keep us safe. Hopefully this will be resolved soon. This could have been resolved last week had the president not doubled down on a national intelligence director who was wholly unqualified to do anything but be an attack dog for the president and go after his enemies. We didn't have to let FISA expire. We could have resolved this last week or the week before. but the president refused to do so. And I do believe that we can balance our national security interests and protecting the Fourth Amendment rights of American citizens. As a former member of the Armed Services Committee, I understand the importance of Section 702. I also understand that it is the American way under our Constitution to balance meeting our national security needs with protecting the civil liberties of American citizens. We can and we should do that immediately.
You point out that you were, in fact, on armed services and as a lawmaker from such an important state when it comes to active duty military and veterans, for that matter. I just wonder, Congresswoman, if you're hearing anything about sailors and airmen coming home who have been on extended deployment from the Caribbean to the Middle East and in some cases back around the world again. We have ships over there who have been at sea for many months more than they had planned to be. When are these men and women coming back to port in Norfolk to rehab their ships and see their families?
That's a very good question. The Ford has, I believe, come back, but they were out longer than they intended to be, and I know their family members were concerned, wondering what the mission was, what exactly the end game for this war was. There were some concerns about the conditions on board, the food that they were being served. I'm very concerned that the needs of our service members and their families are not being cared for. And when you send service members in harm's way, you need to have a clear reason, you need to have a clear strategy, you need to have clear goals. We didn't have that with this war. We had no imminent threat to the United States or our service members or our national security interests. The intelligence community has told us that. This was not about regime change. If it was, we have pretty much the same regime with a younger, more extreme leader. So I don't know why we sent our service members in harm's way. Over 10 have been killed, about 13 were killed, and for what?
Yeah. All right, Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us. Democratic Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan of Virginia with us on Balance of Power. And we'll be back for more at 5 p.m. Eastern for the late edition right here on Bloomberg TV and radio.